today we're going to be looking at what a lot of people are calling the best weapon from Elden Ring's DLC, and yes, I am talking about the Fire Knight's Greatsword, which is an insane colossal weapon, but when you pair it with the right Ashes of Wars, you can shoot out a flame-imbued projectile at your enemies, giving this weapon all kinds of range as well. So yes, this build is going to cover you for pretty much every scenario, so definitely sit back and relax and let me show you how you can create this crazy build for yourself. So yes, we are once again late to the party on this one because you've probably seen many other YouTubers cover this weapon, but that doesn't mean that we shouldn't cover it because it genuinely is an absolute beast, and when you pair the Fire Knight's Greatsword with things like the Flame Spear, you truly have a build that is just outright ridiculous. As I mentioned in the intro, this Ash of War will allow you to shoot a fire projectile at your enemies whilst using a colossal weapon, by the way, but not only that, it will also infuse your weapon with additional fire damage, and the Greatsword itself is an infusion of basically the Zweihander and the Godslayer's Greatsword, where your charged heavy will be the same as the Zweihander's charged heavy, but the light attacks will be the same as the Godslayer's Greatsword, meaning you've got one of the quickest colossal weapons in your hand, but it's also one of the strongest, where we can put a projectile on it as well, and it also breaks enemy stances really easily. But just before we get into the nitty gritty details of the build, I should first of all show you how you get the weapon and the Ash of War, and luckily they can actually be obtained from the same areas, or at least very close to one another. That is because to obtain the Fire Knight Greatsword, you do have to get it as a drop from the Fire Knights that reside in the Shadow Keep, which is pretty much the focal point of the DLC. Again, you can get this dropped from any Fire Knights that is wielding the Greatsword, but the most efficient farming method, or at least the best knight to farm it from, is going to be the one that's residing just outside the storehouse, because if you use the storehouse first floor site of grace and basically go back on yourself and use the elevator that is behind you, you will then lower down right behind the knight that is holding the Fire Knight Greatsword, to which you can of course walk up to him or creep up to him, hit him with a critical hit, destroy him, and rinse and repeat that same process to hopefully get the Fire Knight sword really quickly. Make sure that you bring your silver pickled foulfoots or your silver horn tenders, and make sure you equip the silver scarab talisman to boost your item discovery as much as possible, but this weapon does have a natural discovery rate of 4%, so hopefully it doesn't take too long to farm for this weapon. But when you do, make sure that you do not leave Shadow Keep until you get the Flame Spear, because to obtain that you need to defeat a different Fire Knight who is residing much higher in the storehouse, because if you naturally progress through Shadow Keep past the storehouse 7th floor site of grace, you will then come to this outside area, and more specifically this walkway, where there will be another Fire Knight guarding the door in front of you, and he is the one that is using the Flame Spear Ash of War. And again, after defeating this enemy, you will then be granted with the Flame Spear Ash of War, so now you are fully ready with the weapon and the Ash of War in hand to create this insane build. The next step is to obviously fully upgrade the weapon, or at least upgrade it as much as you can. Apply the Flame Spear Ash of War, but make sure it is the Flame Art version. That will then give you a B-rated scaling in Faith for the weapon, because when we delve a point into Faith, which of course I'll show you the stats in a moment, that is how we're going to deal the astronomic damage that you're seeing me deal, and I believe this gameplay is from New Game Plus 3, so just bear that in mind for reference. But even still, we're doing comfortably sort of 4,000-5,000 damage with the Ash of War, as well as the 38 stance damage if we actually connect our weapon with the enemies, which can turn especially the base game in Elden Ring into an absolute breeze. And of course this damage is amped up even more with the DLC if you have a much higher Shadow Tree rating, because the damage basically doubles. But of course, to mimic this crazy damage that we're dealing, here are the stats that I was using for the build, and again, as always with these videos, it is a level 150 character, and as you can see, we've got 60 points of vigor in this build, 14 mind, 25 endurance, 22 strength, 18 dexterity, 10 intelligence, 70 faith, and 10 arcane. And again, just to explain those a little bit more, the starting class of this character was a wretch, but you can use any starting class that you want, because essentially we do not put any points into either Arcane or Intelligence, as they are relevant for this build. And as I mentioned earlier, as long as you make sure that you apply the Flame Art variant to this weapon, Faith is going to be the best scaling stat, which is why we pump pretty much everything that we can into Faith whilst hitting the minimum requirements of 22 strength and 18 dexterity to wield the weapon. But then I figured in this build we have a little bit more health just in case we do end up trading, because again, you're probably going to see it in the gameplay, but when you do get up close and personal, you do actually deal like 2 types of damage with the Ash of War, like with the initial spear, that's the projectile, and then obviously following through with the weapon itself. So just in case we do trade, that's why I got the extra vigor there. But 14 mind is more than enough for this build, and also 25 endurance is there to give us enough stamina and also enough weight gain to wear a good amount of armor whilst also wielding a fairly heavy weapon. But of course, I know you guys like to delve into a little bit more of a higher level character, and as a guide for the level 200 version of this build, here are the stats for that. So basically just improving our mind and endurance just to allow us to use the Ash of War a little bit more, as well as just have enough stamina to make use of the charged heavy attacks without having to worry about our stamina as much. But then we've also increased our strength and also pumped our faith all the way up to 99, because again, where we've changed this weapon into a Flame Art version, by pumping faith up to 99, you actually get a lot more AR than if you were to be increasing your strength or dexterity values, because both strength and dexterity become an E-rated scaling and basically only give you +1 extra AR every 2 levels. Also, by improving our faith, we will increase the fire damage that we deal with both the Ash of War and the weapon. And just to be abundantly clear here, when you do use the Ash of War and then infuse your weapon with fire afterwards, that will just give you a flat increase of 90 AR to fire damage, and that does not get affected by your faith stat. Basically, the Fire Knight Greatsword comes with a native fire effect, and that will be boosted with your faith stat in this case. But after using the Ash of War and seeing your weapon infused with fire afterwards, that will not change. That will just forever be 90 additional damage. All that aside, no matter what stats you're going to be using with this build, whether it's a level 150 version or a level 200 version, these are going to be the talismans that I highly recommend that you run. And again, as always, feel free to pause this video and jot these down. But where, again, it's fire damage for pretty much everything to do with this weapon and the Ash of War, the Fire Scorpion charm is going to be our best friend, as we get a plus 12% boost to all fire-based damage, which of course is basically everything, as I said, with this weapon. But then I also recommend that you run the Shard of Alexander as well as Godfrey's Icon, because this Ash of War is chargeable. And again, just to be abundantly clear, when I say this Ash of War can do upwards of 38 stance damage, that is indeed with the charged version of the Ash of War. So if you just quick release it, you'll be doing a lot less damage and a lot less stance damage. But again, where it is chargeable, we can get the buff from Godfrey's Icon, which goes on top of the Shard of Alexander's buff, but where we can also use just the weapon itself to deal crazy damage. I also highly recommend running the two-handed talisman, as that way you will get a plus 15% extra damage boost whenever you're two-handing this weapon, which should be basically all the time. So as I say, that's a great mix of talismans to help out with whatever kind of playstyle you want to go with this weapon, as you're getting a damage boost with pretty much every type of attack that we're going to do. But then with the Wonder Physick, if you're running a level 150 version of this build, I highly recommend that you run the Flame Shrouding crack tier along with the Faith Knot tier to boost your overall damage output as much as physically possible. But of course, if you are in a much higher level build that has 99 faith already, I highly recommend that you change the Faith Knot tier into something like the Stone Barb crack tier, especially if you're in your later new game pluses, as that is going to help you out tremendously when breaking enemy stances. In fact, if you feel like you're doing enough damage as it is, even with the level 150 build, feel free to put the Stone Barb crack tier on there, because again, this weapon will just turn into a stance breaking monster. And then just to kind of like finalize the build, if you will, the armor that we're running is indeed the Rakshasa armor, because as much as it's boring, because everybody, and myself included, uses this in every build, we would be wrong not to, because of course you get the additional 8% extra damage when you wear the full set. So 2% extra damage for each piece. But if you wanted to take a few points, say out of Vigor, if you're using the level 150 build, and put them into Endurance so you can run a better and bigger armor set and maybe look a bit cooler too, feel free to do that as well. I'm just obviously trying to get the most damage out of this weapon, and again, in order to get the most damage out of this weapon, for our buffs we are using Golden Vow and also the Howler Shibiri, because with the Howler Shibiri I am then able to proc Madness on myself, as well as getting the plus 25% boost to damage output just with the spell itself, because whenever I do proc Madness I make sure that I am equipping the Black Dumpling Helm as well as the Madding Hand and also the Old One's Exaltation Talisman to give me the respective buffs from those items whenever a Madness proc occurs, which again adds to how I'm doing so much damage with this build. And I should also be hopefully showing you an example of how I'm doing my buffing sequence whilst I'm talking about it here. But as much as this weapon is an absolute powerhouse, it is also extremely fun to use, as I've mentioned many times, you'll just be breaking your enemy stances like no tomorrow, hearing that sweet riposte noise, and of course getting in those sweet critical hits too. So if you haven't got or even tried to get the Fire Knight's Greatsword, I highly recommend that you do, because this weapon truly is deserved of being considered one of the best weapons from the DLC, and this is of course how you make the best build around it. And just like that, that is the end of the video, and as always I want to hear from you guys. Have you used the Fire Knight's Greatsword before? Would you consider it one of the best weapons that we've seen introduced in the DLC? Obviously let me know what your thoughts are about this weapon in the comments down below, and as always you guys know the drill by now. Whilst you're down there, if you happen to like any part of this video or found this build interesting, or if it helps you out in any way, make sure that you leave that like rating down there too, because not only does it help out the channel tremendously, but it genuinely is the quickest and easiest way to let me know that you enjoy these overpowered builds and want to see more in the future. And of course, if you're new around here or find yourself coming back to the channel, also make sure that you're subscribed, because we're actually scheduling our videos now, or at least scheduling the content I create. In fact, I might just throw up a little graphic now for you so you can see it, but essentially you can expect to see a video every Tuesday and Thursday, whilst also having some live streams during the week. In fact, every Monday morning and Wednesday morning UK time, and I will also be throwing in some shorts and TikToks into the mix with all of that. But those 4 pieces of content, so the 2 streams and the 2 videos, will always be there and won't be affected at all in terms of a workload. So if you want to make sure that you don't miss any streams or videos in the future, definitely make sure that you subscribed, because content is going to be coming thick and fast now on the channel. But that's not the only thing that I'm cooking up, because we do indeed have a second channel as well. And for those of you that already knew I had a second channel, you probably didn't know that I've actually lost access to the original second channel. Yes, I know, I'm incredibly stupid. So I made a second channel, and if you want to go over and subscribe to that, although there's no content on it for the moment, we will be making stuff in the future, which will include playing other games and other like maybe IRL stuff in the future. So if that sounds like your kind of thing and you want to stay up to date with all of that, definitely make sure that you go over there and subscribe. But otherwise, I think I've done enough self-promotion and said everything that I need to say at the end of this video, guys. So truly, thank you so much for watching this video. If you are still here, definitely write in the comments that I am a legend. So you are a legend, but write the words "I am a legend," because in that way I will know that you've made it all the way to the end, and I can obviously thank you personally for being said legend and obviously supporting the content. But yeah, I really have said everything I need to say now, guys, so I'm gonna let you go. Obviously enjoy this build, let me know how you get on if you do happen to use it, but I guess for now I'll catch you in the next video of whatever it is that we make. Bye bye.